Welcome to another tutorial here at LightingBot. We're continuing the Unity URP lighting tutorial into tripod lighting. In real life, the directional light can do a lot of the work. Yeah, it does the rim light, it does the fill light, it kind of bounces around and it does a lot of the work. Even outside in a controlled setting, you have the key light and it kind of does all the works, the specularity and so on. In interior lighting, it's the same thing. You can place the lights and you can create the mood as well. But because we are trying to do more than just natural lighting, we want to have a specific purpose for the lighting. So we'll practice the three-point lighting to create the rim light, to create the fill light, and kind of control the shape of the figure, shape of the object. And that's the key thing. The three-point lighting is meant to create the shape and the form, and then eventually store it through the placement and the color. Next up, or the first thing in terms of in Unity, we're gonna add a point light. Now, you don't need to add a point light, and you shouldn't normally add a point light, but just for the sake of example, we're gonna add a point light. And I'm gonna add it in a way that it covers mostly the right side of the face, so the opposite of the camera. The camera is more towards the left side, and I want to cover the light on the opposite side, right side of the camera, and also right side of the face. Somewhere around here. I just want to cover the face and also cover the eyes, and then a little bit on the bottom of the body, and then inside of the skull basically. Now you can move the light away to dim it. As said before, you can reduce the intensity of the light if it's too bright. I'm gonna put it on 2.5 because I'm gonna use range to dim it down, because I don't want any background light coming from this light. I just want enough to fill the light. And then I'm gonna just randomly pick a color, maybe this one. So that's the key light. The purpose of the key light is to be the brightest. The purpose of the key light is to fill the face, and there's different ways and techniques. This is almost kind of like a Rembrandt lighting. Normally Rembrandt light has a triangle, and it's kind of is a triangle here, but Rembrandt lighting and Rembrandt paintings is things you can look up on, and we will maybe cover that too actually. But basically you can see that it's Rembrandt broad is what I call it, because it kind of broadens the image by making sure that we are fading in and kind of shaping the mask a little bit. But it's not enough. Next thing, you can either add a backlight or a spotlight in terms of the fill light. So fill light or backlight. I'm gonna use a spotlight, and I'm gonna go left side of the camera, opposite of the key light, and I'm gonna make sure that I can cover enough area to fill in the dark side. But it's too bright. It's kind of competing with the key light, so I'm gonna dim it down so it's just a little bit. I'm gonna reduce the range so I only hit the face and the sides a little bit, and then maybe for the fun of it, maybe I'll try a different color, maybe a bit light blue color, like so. Okay, now you don't see the background, and we're not separating the background. There's two ways of approaching it. You can fill the background itself, or you can rim light the character. So let's try and see if we can achieve both by using a spotlight. So that you can fill in the background very quickly like this. And then if you want to, you can move the character's shape by moving the light. You can kind of see, okay, is there anywhere that would help in terms of separating the character? Obviously you don't need it as bright, so you might do a lot less in this case, and in this case you might also try maybe a different color like so. Alright, so that's the purpose of the three-point lighting. The purpose of three-point lighting is to help you do lighting in a structured and organized way. You have the key light, which is the strongest light, 2.5. You have the fill light, which can often be the second strongest light at 0.5, and you have the fill light, which is often at the back, and in this case I've kept it at 0.5 to have strong highlights, but there's nothing stopping you to make it really subtle. But the reason that we didn't do it is just because I want to make sure that the background is also a little bit filled and getting this vignette effect without adding post-processing effect. Alright. This is Rembrandt Harmison von Rijn. He is the classical painter, and this is his self-portrait here, right here. You can see the technique he uses in paintings are on the right side. It's a triangle that shows up on the darker side of the painting. We use it very commonly towards the camera, so the darker side tends to be towards the camera, and the bright side that creates the Rembrandt triangle and lighting, the key light, is often on the left side, away from the camera. And you can use soft light, you can use area light, it doesn't really matter as long as it creates the harsh enough shadow and contrast that you can see it. For the Adam model, he doesn't have a nose that actually goes all this way out as it does on humans, so you don't get to see that clear shape in our example here in this tutorial. But it's still Rembrandt broad in this case. So it's a very good technique to create a contrast and shape and form, and you use the fill light to fill in the darker side. So now you have some basic intro on Rembrandt lighting. So that's that. So now I'm going to turn this off, and I'm going to show you two other examples that I have prepared. So you have this one, you have the key light. It's pretty broad, it's placed up kind of the same place, and the reason we place it the same place is also because of the eyes. We're trying to get that specular effect and cover the eyes properly, get some specular effect on the bottom areas, mostly the face, so you get some shape. You can see this one is intensity 4. You have a backlight, and in this case I'm using an area light to fill in the background, and it's intensity 1 with a range of 3.5. You have a fill light, which is another spotlight, which is only 0.5 and range 2. Its purpose is to make sure that we can fill in the darkness a little bit and the edges of this, and kind of get the speck effect that you can see popping up on the edges here. Now the difference here is we're going to bake it as well, because the area light needs to be baked. So we're going to bake it, and you can see how it ends up looking once that backlight is added as an added effect as well. Okay, so now you can see it comes from the bottom and goes up in this particular example. Right, you have the light on the right side, you have a fill light on the left, you have specular effects happening across the screen and the helmet. You get the general shape. Okay, now light bounces around, and I'm going to keep repeating it until you understand the mindset and how to use your eye properly. So these marked areas, they will be completely black. Now black cloth obviously absorbs light, as previously mentioned, and I will keep mentioning these things. So this would how it would be looking like if light stopped on its first surface it's hit. But in photography and the way we want to work, we want to control the lighting, and we can steal things from photography to do that. So the reflector is on the right side in this video, and it's used instead of an actual light source, it's used as a fill light. So the light hits the surface and it bounces back to the darker side. The next example, let's clear the data, and let's do the bonus example. Here in this example, it's similar. You have the key light. The key light is now further up, so it gives more of a specular effect on the top of the face, but it also goes into the mask a little bit, so you get to see the behind a little bit. But we keep light hitting on the shoulder, lower shoulder, ribs as well, and you can see it's also hitting the top of the helmet a bit more. Then you have the backlight as well. The backlight obviously is still an area light with a certain intensity. What's different though is we're using a plane. We're using an old school technique which is still viable today to add in the fill light. So if I bake now, because you need it for the bounce light that comes on the plane, which is kind of acting up as a reflector that we often use in movies and cinema. and you have the backlight filling up in the background. Okay, so you can see that distance has already been placed for a reason, and you can see it's filling in. So if I turn it off and I do another bake to show you what happens when you don't have this reflector that you can see through when it's on at the back as well when you're using a plane. Here you can see it's pretty dark. So if I turn it back on, and on top of that, let's put a more white texture material on it. And what you'll see now is it's gonna increase the light even more here. See that? Now it's even more bright, because even though I didn't change the distance of my fake plane reflector, which you can see through, so you could have a camera on the other side if you needed to. No problem. You can see it's giving this interesting look as well, and the fill light for it. And this obviously uses less light. Essentially I only have two lights. I have the area light and I have the key light, and I use the reflector instead, which obviously helps if you need to have a different type of optimization or a different workflow, or maybe you want more natural bounce light that's evenly spread and you don't want to use another area light because of rendering time, whatever reason. You can do this as well. Now if I then go even further and I say, okay, I want very dark texture, and as briefly discussed before, and we will continue to emphasize the theory and why it's important to understand real life lighting and color, is that if I use a dark texture, less light is going to bounce from it, and you can see now it becomes more contrasty. This is also why it's important to have the key light kind of cover the key areas like most of the face and the eyes, because then you can do these kind of things. Right? Now if I push this pretty close and I do another bake, because it's closer, the light's not traveling that far, it's stopping on time pretty early, so it's gonna bounce a lot more despite the material. Okay, you can see it's filling up a lot more in this example. So depending on what you're going for and kind of what you're hoping for, you can also make it bigger if that's needed, and that's also gonna have a subtle effect, sometimes a very big effect, because you have to remember the range and size of the light casting, and in this case it's pretty big. So if I have a bigger reflector, more light is gonna hit it and more light is also gonna react and bounce off on it. And it's gonna bounce on the floor and it's gonna bounce around according to the size as well. Okay. And then if I turn it down and maybe I you know, just bake it again, and this is kind of the workflow you do. So here you can see there's two examples extra, where we had the 3-point lighting kind of showed previously, where we use area lights from 3 different points as well. That's obviously also a viable way of doing it. Now the next thing we're gonna do is we are gonna continue and we're gonna explore a little bit in terms of color. So I've already given you 2 examples of color, but I want you guys to do an exercise, and once you have the 3-point lighting, I want you to go in and play with the colors and see what happens when you use different colors and what color matches the lighting and mood. Alright, so thanks for watching, and have a nice day. Thanks for watching. Remember, we have a lot of other content, so please like, subscribe and share, watch the interviews and so on.